Good evening and welcome. I am coming to you live from our World News Desk with a story that is sending shockwaves across the globe tonight. The Middle East is standing at the edge of a precipice, and the world is watching. Tonight, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has issued a bold and defiant challenge to the United States, declaring that his nation will not bend under any pressure, not military, not economic, not diplomatic. These words come at a moment when the Persian Gulf is bristling with American warships, fighter jets, and stealth bombers, the largest such buildup since the United States invaded Iraq in 2003. And in Washington, President Donald Trump has not minced words either, warning Tehran it has 10 to 15 days to reach a nuclear deal or face consequences he has described as both tough and traumatic. Tonight, we bring you the full picture from the front lines of this diplomatic and military standoff. Our story begins on Saturday, February 22nd in Tehran, where Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian was addressing a ceremony honoring Iran's Paralympic athletes. But his message was not just for the athletes in the room. It was a message for Washington and for the world. Standing before the gathered crowd, President Pezeshkian drew a direct comparison between the perseverance of his nation's Paralympians and the resistance of Iran itself. He told the audience that just as these athletes refused to surrender in the face of physical hardship, Iran would refuse to surrender in the face of geopolitical pressure. His message was clear, deliberate, and pointed directly at the White House. Pezeshkian accused world powers of acting with what he called cowardice, attempting to force Iran to submit through threats and intimidation rather than genuine engagement. The Iranian president made one thing abundantly clear: Tehran will not bow, and it will not break. This statement lands in a context of enormous pressure on Iran. The country has been dealing with crippling international sanctions, widespread domestic unrest, the aftermath of Israeli and American strikes on its nuclear facilities last June, and now an unprecedented military buildup on its doorstep. Yet the message from the top of the Iranian government remains the same: we stand firm. To understand just how serious this situation has become, we must look at what the United States has been quietly, and now very publicly, assembling in the waters and skies surrounding Iran. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is already positioned in the Arabian Sea. And now cutting through the Mediterranean and heading toward the Gulf is the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest aircraft carrier ever built by human hands. 2 supercarriers, dozens of fighter jets, F-22 Raptors, F-35 stealth fighters, E-3 Sentry airborne warning and control aircraft, more than 120 aircraft deployed to the region in recent days alone. Military analysts are watching one particular location very carefully: Diego Garcia, the joint U.S.-UK base in the Indian Ocean. It is one of the very few bases in the world capable of hosting the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, the same aircraft that participated in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, when the United States bombed Iran's nuclear sites at Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. Military experts say, if you see B-2s move, the clock has started. Meanwhile, satellite imagery reviewed by major news organizations this week reveals a striking development at Jordan's Muwafaq Salti Air Base. At least 60 aircraft and 68 cargo planes, alongside F-35s, drones, and new air defense systems. Hundreds of U.S. personnel have reportedly been relocated from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. In total, approximately 35,000 American troops are now deployed across the Middle East region. The White House has reportedly been briefed that the U.S. military could be ready to carry out strikes within days if the order is given. The last time this level of military concentration was seen near Iran was before the Iraq War in 2003. Yet even as the drums of war grow louder, diplomacy has not yet died. And this is the paradox at the heart of this crisis. Talks are ongoing even as both sides prepare for the possibility that those talks will fail. The United States and Iran have held 2 rounds of indirect negotiations in recent weeks. The first in Muscat, Oman, on February 6th, mediated by Oman's foreign minister, and the second in Geneva, Switzerland, on February 17th. These are not face-to-face talks. The 2 delegations sit in separate rooms, and a mediator shuttles messages between them, a reflection of just how deep the distrust between Washington and Tehran truly runs. After the Geneva round, Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi emerged with cautiously optimistic words. Both sides had reached broad agreement on what he called guiding principles, a framework that could serve as the foundation for a formal deal. He announced that Iran would prepare a written draft proposal for Washington within 2 to 3 days. He described a diplomatic solution as being within reach. But American officials offered a more measured response. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance stated that Iran had not acknowledged the red lines established by President Trump. And those red lines are significant. Trump's team has demanded not just limits on Iran's nuclear program, but a complete halt to uranium enrichment, the removal of enriched uranium stockpiles, and broader negotiations covering Iran's ballistic missile program and its support for proxy groups across the region. Iran's position is equally firm on the other side. Tehran has insisted on its right to peaceful uranium enrichment under the International Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has firmly refused to include its missile capabilities or regional alliances in the negotiations, and it has made clear it will not be pressured into surrendering its nuclear program entirely. A senior Iranian official, however, has indicated some flexibility, suggesting Tehran could consider exporting portions of its enriched uranium stockpile, reducing enrichment purity, or joining a regional enrichment consortium. A next round of negotiations is reportedly being planned for early March. To truly understand what both sides are fighting over, we need to look at Iran's nuclear program itself and what the international community knows and does not know about its current status. In June 2025, the United States joined Israel in striking Iran's three main nuclear facilities, Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu declared at the time that the strikes had eliminated Iran's nuclear capability, but that assessment is now being seriously questioned. Satellite imagery analyzed by the Institute for Science and International Security shows Iran has been actively hardening and concealing what remains of its nuclear infrastructure. Fresh concrete has been poured over tunnel entrances at the underground facility near Natanz. A concrete sarcophagus has been completed over the Talagan 2 site at the Parchin military complex southeast of Tehran. Missile facilities are being rebuilt. Air bases struck in last year's conflict are being repaired. The United Nations nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, estimates Iran currently holds more than 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% fissile purity. Weapons-grade uranium is 90%. Iran is, in the assessment of many experts, only a short technical step away from having enough material for a nuclear weapon. Iranian officials deny any military dimension to the nuclear program, maintaining that it is entirely for peaceful energy purposes. But international monitors have grown increasingly skeptical. And in June 2025, the IAEA found Iran non-compliant with its nuclear obligations for the first time in 20 years. Behind the official statements and military posturing, there is a human story unfolding inside Iran, a nation of more than 80 million people living under extraordinary stress. Iran's economy has been severely weakened by international sanctions, which have strangled the country's oil revenues. Since the strikes of last June, the government has also faced a significant new wave of domestic protests, citizens taking to the streets against rising costs, economic hardship, and political repression. That crackdown drew further international condemnation and led President Trump in January to issue new threats of military action against Iran. On the streets of Tehran, opinions are divided. Some citizens express resignation, believing that military confrontation is eventually inevitable because what Washington seeks is full surrender, and the Iranian state will never accept that. Others hold a more defiant view, expressing confidence that the United States, having struggled in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Vietnam, will ultimately be unable to overpower Iran. Multiple countries, including Sweden, Serbia, Poland, and Australia, have now formally advised their citizens still living in Iran to leave the country as quickly as possible. When governments begin issuing such warnings, it is always a signal worth taking seriously. The stakes of this confrontation extend far beyond Iran and the United States. They reach into every economy on Earth because of one critical geographic choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, and approximately 20% of global oil supplies pass through it every single day. Iran controls access to this strait. Tehran has repeatedly and explicitly threatened to shut it down entirely in the event of a military attack. If that were to happen, global oil markets would convulse instantly. Crude prices have already begun rising in anticipation of further escalation. Adding a further dimension to the tension, Iranian and Russian naval units conducted joint exercises exercises this week at the port of Bandar Abbas, right at the entrance to the strait. This was a deliberate signal from both Tehran and Moscow. Iran has deep strategic ties with both Russia and China, and international relations experts warn that any military confrontation could draw in those powers, potentially transforming what begins as a U.S.-Iran clash into a far broader geopolitical crisis. Iran has also written formally to the United Nations Security Council, declaring that while it does not seek war and will not fire the first shot, any act of aggression against it will be met with a decisive and proportionate response, and that the United States will bear full responsibility for any consequences that follow. And so, as this Sunday comes to a close, the world holds its breath. Two powers, one with nuclear weapons already built, one racing to restore its nuclear capacity, are locked in a confrontation that could tip either into a diplomatic deal or into open warfare within a matter of weeks. The next round of negotiations is expected in early March. President Trump's deadline expires soon. Both sides say they want a deal. Both sides are also preparing very visibly for the alternative. You know, the Middle East has seen crises before. It has pulled back from the brink before. But tonight, military experts, diplomats, and intelligence analysts are watching this standoff with a level of alarm that few have expressed in decades. The coming days will tell us whether the language of diplomacy or the language of war will ultimately prevail. We will continue to bring you live updates as this story develops. Stay with us.